Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, Heroes in a Half Shell, Turtle Power! Wait a minute, aren't they ninjas? The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles! You may have heard of them, or you may not, but for those unfamiliar, allow me to give you a brief summary. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles got their start in 1984, coming from the minds of underground independent comic book creators Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman, basing the idea of combining something that was slow as a turtle with something as fast as a martial artist. The initial comics were a surprise hit, with a few nibblers here and there to license the brand. One of those nibblers that they found was Mark Friedman, a freelance agent who was in charge of representing different intellectual properties, while helping out with making the deals, as well as being the self-proclaimed fifth turtle in the group, as we'll see in a moment. For you see, he was looking for the next big IP to license to a toy and entertainment industry. And he foresaw the potential of the Turtles from this dynamic duo. They accepted Mark's offer, under the pretense that they have full creative control over all decisions going forward. So a deal was set, with Mark having the difficult task of selling the idea of this property to a company, with the help of a big foam rubber turtle provided by the guys. The task was actually quite difficult, with many not seeing the appeal of turtles being heroic, or the color green being particularly attractive. Not helping matters was that the word ninja at the time still had associations with hired assassin, which didn't sound too appealing for a children's toy line, especially for parents. Eventually, after several rejections from other companies such as LJN and Mattel, Mark ends up calling a friend of his, Richard Salas, who was recently hired to work for a company called Playmates Toys. Mark sent in a life-sized replica of one of the turtles to Richard, who after seeing it was eager to hear more. Afterwards, they had a deal with Playmates, but then having another issue to deal with: family friendliness. You see, the original iteration of the Turtles was known to be violent and graphic, which ironically fit into the definition of what others expected when they heard the word ninja. To make their concept work, the Turtles undergone something of a transformation, which was not only reflected in the toys, but also the show. Especially the show, as a matter of fact, as before debuting the Turtles with their initial 5-part miniseries, the people in charge made a few changes. First was giving the Turtles distinct bandana colors and belt buckles, so that it would be easier to tell them apart. Second was giving them distinct personalities, so that there wouldn't be any redundant members of the group. So the first member, Leonardo, or Leo for short, would be the balanced and level-headed leader of the group, and the one to take his martial arts studies the most seriously. Next would be Donatello, or Donnie for short, where he would be the brains of the group, creating all sorts of inventions to help the Turtles on their journeys. Then there's Raphael, or Raph for short, who was initially the wise guy smart aleck member of the group, where he would be more of a tough guy than a smart aleck who makes wisecracks. Though of course, he still maintains his heart of gold, especially to his friends. I feel the reason why they did this was so that down the line, that there be a way to distinguish Raph from the true funny man of the group, Michelangelo. Or Mikey for short. for he would be the fun-loving, footloose, and carefree member of the group who would always be down for a good time. But regardless of whoever might be your favorite, there would be two things that would always stick with the turtles throughout their various incarnations. First is that they were to be honorable ninjas that would defend their home from the forces of evil. And two is that they would always have a love for pizza. However, an aspect of one of those things would have to change when taking the brand over to Europe, specifically the United Kingdom. In 1974, the iconic Bruce Lee film Enter the Dragon would make its way into UK theaters. This being a little while after its initial release in the United States in 1973. And just like with other regions of the world such as the aforementioned United States, it would be a smash hit in the UK as well. However, as is the case with anything that is popular, the film facilitated the spark of a martial arts craze going on there. For you see, Enter the Dragon wasn't the only major martial arts film to be released at the time. But that didn't help its case with concerns over cases of injuries involving nunchaku, otherwise called nunchucks. The reason why was that British street gangs in the UK were using weapons from popular movies to harm one another. One of those being the aforementioned nunchucks. So thanks to the association with the violence of youths, the nunchucks were seen as easily obtainable and dangerous weapons. James Furman, or is it Furman? A prominent figure of the British Board of Film Classification, or BBFC for short, took advice from various sources such as law enforcement to ban the usage of certain weapons, words, and themes from all UK localized versions of TV and film. This would result in the ban of nunchaku and shuriken in 1975. And not just any ban, but a ban so severe that the mere existence of nunchucks existing would have an entire scene removed, just because the nunchucks were barely in the frame. So you can probably imagine the treatment that poor Mikey, master of the nunchaku, had to go through just to appear on screen sometimes. Some examples being shown right now. But it wasn't just the nunchucks and shuriken, but the term ninja would also face heavy censorship. Remember the initial concerns some people had with showing a show about hired assassins to kids? Despite this incarnation of the Turtles being anything but that definition. Well, those localizing the brand must have also had the same concerns in the UK, as the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles would become the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. And just as with the nunchuck censorship, there would also be censorship to just about every mention of the word ninja in the show, or in general. That being regardless of whether it would be a good or a bad guy, just as with the case of nunchaku. This censorship also applied to many nearby countries, including Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, Poland, Hungary, and all of Scandinavia. At least to what I could find anyway. Some differed a bit though, such as Germany and Austria having native language dubbed versions based on the UK edit. German Turtles, anyone? In any case, the producers and writers of the original United States version of the show would eventually start to do a bit of censoring themselves. This notably resulted in Mikey in the 4th season of the show and onwards preferring to use the turtle line grappling hook as his main weapon, as well as other unconventional weapons such as rocks. The nunchucks still exist, however, with the occasional use of them here and there, but as for being his go-to weapon, that would be the turtle line grappling hook. At least for the remainder of the show. You might be asking if this Heroes turtle branding applied to everything in the UK. Well, yes and no. A better answer to that question would be inconsistent. For example, the live-action Ninja Turtles films around that time would for some reason carry the original Ninja Turtles title, instead of the usual Hero Turtles title. Scenes involving nunchucks would still be removed, though at this point had some extra takes done so as to work around the censorship of some scenes. Though not every scene was made in mind here, as the scene that would be inevitably cut would be the scene of Mikey and a random Foot Clan ninja showing off their nunchaku skills to one another. Bruce Lee style, of course. Another inconsistency would be some of the video games, where despite having the Hero Turtles name in the title, Michelangelo was allowed to use nunchakus here and there. So to say the least, it wasn't consistent across the board. But anyway, after the release of the first movie, most of the board was starting to feel that the censorship over ninjas and nunchaku should stop at some point. 1991 did have the BBFC sort of easing on the restriction by saying that they would allow the brief usage of nunchucks in a scene, but this didn't ultimately do much. Because just in the second movie, where Mikey uses sausages in the same vein as nunchaku, on some robbers, the scene would end up getting removed anyway. So when it came to the 90s live-action TV series, Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation, Mikey would end up wielding a pair of tonfa, a different type of martial arts weapon, similar to the case with the cartoon. Though getting back to the other merchandise, we have the video games in the 80s and 90s being released with some inconsistencies. For despite having the Hero Turtles branding, virtually nothing about the weapons being used was changed. This was largely due to video games lacking an age rating system in Europe at the time. Though funny enough, the BBFC would end up giving age ratings to video games later on, and would enforce their standards on other games, such as Tenchu Stealth Assassins, which had throwing stars replaced with throwing knives. I should mention that the BBFC would only rate the more mature video games, as the ELSPA would at the same time rate games for younger audiences. Though that didn't stop Final Fantasy VIII from changing the name Nunchaku to Shinobu, or Sticks of Death in Japanese. Last but not least were the toys, where despite them also being branded as Hero Turtles, would still have action figures come out with nunchucks, and sometimes even throwing stars, if said characters were to wield them. Though perhaps the most inconsistent of the merchandise would be when some merchandise couldn't decide on what weapons the turtles would carry, sometimes even getting the colors mixed up in the process. The result would actually make national news of parents complaining about how these color weapon inaccuracies would make the merchandise come across as cheap bootlegs and rip-offs despite technically being official. Eventually, the BBFC would decide to loosen up with all of these ninja censors in 1999. Though would still keep an eye out for any weapons that were seen as realistic and easily obtainable, as well as having a more context-based approach, as opposed to the mentality of, that weapon is there, let's get rid of it. So no more weapon removal just because it appeared in a scene. Though would be a little harder on weapons such as knives at the time. Still, the results were some previous movies such as Enter the Dragon finally getting an uncut release in European territories, with the BBFC lightening up over time with weapons in general. And for those curious, the people to take over rating video games in at least some European territories would be PEGI, as the BBFC would stop rating video games come 2012. At some point in 2012, anyway. Phew! And that's the story of the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles in Europe. Or more specifically, a portion of European territories. In either case, by the time the restrictions went, it would be just in time for the 2003 incarnation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to air on European TVs without any further interference. Though when it comes to localization, it wouldn't just be with cases of censorship. Join me next time as we go over an example of localization that is meant to make a brand more appealing in another country. But for now, have fun with your challenge, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!